The sharp clink of a silver spoon tapping a Dom Perignon wine glass cut straight through the soft violin music floating over more than 100 high society guests at our oceanfront Malibu estate. Salty sea air mixed with the heavy hit of Baccarat Rouge 540, creating a scent that tasted like money and lies. Today was my son Noah's second birthday, but Julian, my husband, turned it into his personal runway show. Julian stood center stage, one hand holding his glass, the other resting far too casually on Tiffany's waist. Tiffany was his new assistant, 22 years old, wearing a red slit dress so high it violated any minimum standard of decency for a child's party. She stared up at Julian with worship, the kind of look Julian craved more than cocaine. The crowd murmured. Board members' wives glanced at me with pity. They assumed I was some poor, decorative wife, looking the other way to keep the title of CEO's Mrs. They were wrong. Julian jerked his chin at me, signaling me to come up and say a few words. He thought I'd play the graceful wife, thank everyone, smile politely, then disappear into the background while he kept performing successful entrepreneur with his side piece. I smoothed my black silk dress, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the platform. I took the microphone. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Noah, I began, my voice smooth as velvet. Julian and I have always wanted the very best for our son. And since today is such a special occasion, I see my husband has brought in a very interesting new addition to our household. I turned toward Julian and Tiffany. Julian's smile stiffened. Tiffany blinked, confused. Everyone, I raised my voice, pointing straight at Tiffany's blazing red dress. Please give a warm round of applause for Tiffany. She's the new high-end nanny Julian just hired from, well, I'm guessing some dating app, to provide special care for his personal needs. The entire space went dead quiet. Someone coughed. Tiffany's face went from the red of her dress to a sickly purple. She yanked her hand away and stepped back from Julian like he was on fire. Oh, don't be shy, Tiffany, I continued, my smile turning razor sharp. For what Julian's paying you, I'm sure you're very experienced at taking care of grown children, right? A few giggles popped in the crowd, then grew. The public humiliation was my first slap. Julian shot me a murderous look, veins rising in his neck, but he didn't dare explode in front of investors. He forced a pathetic, crooked smile. Elena is so funny, Julian said into his own mic, his voice trembling. Tiffany is a strategic assistant. Strategic? I cut in immediately. Perfect. Then she'll love the next gift. Julian, honey, I have a birthday present for you. Yes, today is Noah's birthday, but I think you deserve this even more. I signaled a server to bring out a luxurious black velvet box. Julian visibly relaxed. He probably expected a Patek Philippe as a peace offering. Julian always believed everything could be solved with something expensive. Julian opened the box. There was no watch. Only a thick stack of documents, clipped together with cold metal fasteners. What is this? Julian frowned, lifting the papers. That's a court summons, Julian, I said, loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. Divorce papers. And attached is an emergency asset freeze order on your Ethereos shares for violating ethics clauses and committing financial fraud. The crystal glass in Julian's hand slipped and shattered on the ground. Wine splashed across his polished Italian leather shoes. Let me tell you why I did it. 5 years ago, Julian was a mediocre project manager drowning in debt from gambling and sketchy investments. And me, Elena, was a reclusive software engineer. I built Ethereos, a revolutionary AI-based cloud data compression platform. Out of stupid love, and because I've never liked crowds, I let Julian put his name down as founder. I handed him the key to the upper class. I worked 20 hours a day in the basement, writing line after line of code, patching bugs, while Julian played golf and partied to raise capital. When the company took off and went public, Julian changed. He started believing he was actually a genius. He began disrespecting me, mocking how I dressed, and eventually he started bringing girls like Tiffany around when I wasn't home. But Julian forgot one thing. I'm the architect of the system. He thinks he runs the company? No. He's just driving a car while I'm holding the steering wheel remotely. For the last 8 months, I stayed silent. I saw their texts. I heard the sneaky bathroom calls. I saw 5-star hotel bills paid with the company card under client entertainment. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I did what a good engineer always does: collect data and hunt for the system vulnerability. And I found Julian's fatal flaw, a stupid mistake he made from day one when we signed the original equity agreement. He signed it drunk, celebrating a win, and never read it again. Back at the party, Julian was flipping through the documents, his hands shaking. You can't do this," Julian hissed, eyes bloodshot. "Marital assets. My lawyer will crush you." I stepped off the stage and walked closer. Fear rolled off him thicker than the wine. "Which lawyer, Julian?" I whispered into his ear. "The one you've been using company money to keep on retainer in Las Vegas since last month?" I served him too. I smiled and turned to the event videographer's camera that was live streaming onto the big screen. If you want to see how a housewife takes down an arrogant CEO in 60 minutes, hit subscribe right now, because what I'm about to reveal about Julian's assets is going to fry your brain. People say, if you want to test a man's character, give him power. For Julian, power and money weren't a test. They were poison. And he drank it down like he was dying of thirst. The change didn't happen like an explosion. It happened like internal rot. When Ethereum started landing its first multi-million-dollar contracts with Silicon Valley giants, Julian changed the way he spoke. He stopped calling us partners. He started calling us my employees. He became obsessed with image. Tech hoodies got tossed aside and replaced by custom suits worth $8,000. He dyed his hair, whitened his teeth, and got Botox. But the scariest part was how he treated the people who helped us build the company from zero. The first victim was Marcus, our elderly CFO, the man who had mortgaged his retirement home to lend us startup money. One gray Tuesday morning, I walked into the office and found Marcus packing his things into a small cardboard box. Julian stood there, hands in his pockets, face blank. "Julian says I don't have the vision to keep up with the company anymore," Marcus told me, eyes wet. "He wants a younger, more energetic CFO." I stormed into Julian's office and slammed my hand on his desk. "What the hell are you doing? Marcus's family." Julian didn't even look up from his iPad. "Marcus is the past, Elena. We need the future. I just hired a new CFO from Wall Street. And by the way, you should stop coming to the office so much. Your presence lowers the morale of the young team." That was the first knife. He isolated me. He turned me from co-founder into the boss's wife, a minor character who only appeared at year-end parties. Then Tiffany showed up. She wasn't a Wall Street talent. She was an Instagram girl Julian met at a yacht party. He named her Director of Public Relations. Her daily job was posting selfies in the office and ordering expensive lunches on the company card. The humiliation escalated when Julian started openly insulting my intelligence. At a dinner with investors, someone asked about the core compression algorithm, the one I wrote myself, line by line, and Julian laughed loudly and patted my shoulder. "Oh, Elena just handles logistics. She's better at baking than writing code." The architecture was redesigned by me and my new engineering team. I clenched my napkin under the table until my knuckles went white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the whole table. But I remembered my attorney's advice. Don't let emotion ruin the evidence. Let them dig their own grave. So I chose silence. And that's when I started Operation Ghost. Julian thought he controlled everything. He changed email passwords, added fingerprint security, and used encrypted messaging apps. He thought I was some tech-blind housewife. Ridiculous. He forgot I built the internal network for Ethereos. I didn't need his password. I owned the master key to the whole system. Every night when Julian snored drunk or pretended he was working late at a hotel, I sat in the dark home office, blue light washing over my face. I started collecting. Dirty money flow. I accessed a hidden accounting layer. Julian was bleeding the company in a clever way. Massive charges under market research were really Tiffany's penthouse rent and secret trips to the Maldives. I downloaded every invoice and bank statement and cross-checked them against his flight records. Location data. Julian turned off phone location, but he was too stupid to stop wearing a smartwatch synced to the family iCloud account I controlled. I rebuilt his movement map. Four Seasons Hotel, Tiffany's apartment, luxury jewelry stores. The final betrayal plan. This is what made my blood turn cold. In a hidden folder labeled Freedom Project, I found emails between Julian and his personal lawyer. How do I eliminate Elena completely before the Series C round starts? Julian asked. We'll claim she's mentally unstable and lacks legal capacity, or force her to sign a divorce settlement for a low payout. You need to make her look crazy in public, the lawyer replied. After reading that, I didn't feel heartbreak anymore, only disgust. The man I loved was dead. The thing living in my house was a greedy monster that needed to be destroyed. But with all his arrogance, Julian made a fatal mistake. A mistake from back when we were eating instant noodles in the garage. I opened my personal safe and pulled out an old envelope. Inside was a handwritten paper, the ink slightly faded, but the signature still clear. It was the earliest version of our founder agreement. Back then, Julian treated it like a meaningless scrap. He signed it without reading the extra clauses on the back. Clauses written by a cautious woman who always prepares for the worst. My finger traced Clause 10.4, the Doomsday Protocol. Julian thought holding 60% meant he was king. He didn't know his shares were built on a false foundation I could pull out whenever I wanted. I smiled and closed the folder. The evidence was enough. The trap was set. And our son's birthday would be the place I tightened the noose. Julian was enjoying the last minutes of his arrogance. He had no idea the boring housewife was about to become the worst legal nightmare of his life. The party froze after my announcement. But Julian, with the instincts of a man trained to manage PR crises, quickly pulled his face back into control. He signaled security to block the cameras, then grabbed my elbow with a grip hard enough that I knew I'd have bruises tomorrow. Inside. Now. He hissed through his teeth, his fake smile still pasted on for the guests. We need to talk. Privately. I didn't resist. I let him drag me into the large library on the first floor, the dark oak room where he hosted his most important visitors. Tiffany hurried after us, clutching her designer wallet, black mascara tears streaking down her cheeks. And of course, Raymond, the general counsel for Ethereos, couldn't be missing. A gray-suited fox with narrow eyes full of calculation. The heavy wood door slammed shut, trapping the four of us in cigar smoke and tension. Julian released my arm and spun on me like a wounded animal. Are you insane, Elena? He roared, throwing the divorce packet onto the desk. Papers scattered. You caused a scene in front of Series C investors. Do you have any idea how much your stupid asset freeze will tank the stock tomorrow? I calmly walked to the leather armchair across from the desk, sat down and crossed my legs like I was there for afternoon tea. That is exactly the point, Julian, I replied softly, ice in my voice. The stock has to drop for you to feel pain. If I just cried in the bedroom, you'd never care. Tiffany sobbed, trying to speak. You're evil. You're jealous because Julian loves me. You ruined Noah's day just to get revenge. Shut up, Tiffany. I glanced at her, my eyes sharp enough to silence her instantly. You don't have the right to speak in this room. Sit in the corner and stay quiet, or I'll send your spending statements to the IRS right now." Raymond stepped forward. He adjusted his tie and gave me that oily, superior smile. He believed he was holding the handle of the knife. "Listen, Elena," Raymond said smoothly. "I understand you're emotional. Women often act irrationally when they're jealous, but legally, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Ethereos was built during the marriage, but Julian is the primary operator and value creator. If you divorce now, we'll prove you made no significant contribution beyond staying home." He picked up the divorce papers, skimmed them, and sneered. "You want 50%? Not happening. We have a legal team ready to bury you in litigation for a decade. You'll run out of money for attorneys before the first hearing. Best option is to sign the amicable settlement I drafted. A suburban condo, $20,000 a month, and you disappear from Julian's life. That's generous." Julian stood beside him, arms crossed, smug. "You heard him. Don't try to play mind games with me, Elena. You're just an engineer. I'm the king of this board." I looked at the three of them. Their arrogance was pathetic. They truly believed current money and power were permanent. "Raymond," I said, lowering my voice, "you graduated Harvard Law, right? Then you should know the most basic rule. Always verify the original documents." I slowly opened my purse and pulled out a thin folder in a clear plastic sleeve. It looked old and out of place in this luxury room. "What is that?" Julian frowned. "This is the original founder and IP assignment agreement dated August 12, 2018, I said, setting it gently on the desk. "Back when Ethereos was nothing but a name on a napkin." Julian burst out laughing, echoing off the oak panels. "That junk? I signed it just to make you happy. It doesn't mean anything compared to the current corporate charter after 5 amendment rounds." "Oh, it does, Julian. Because it includes a clause the charter never mentions. And more importantly, you never terminated it in writing." I flipped the folder open and pointed at a paragraph highlighted in bright yellow. "Read Clause 8.2, the revert mechanism." "Out loud, Raymond," I ordered, chin lifted toward him. Raymond took the paper, skeptical. His expression stayed mocking for 1 second. Then the smile died. Sweat appeared on his forehead. His hand began to shake. "Read," I repeated. Raymond swallowed, voice going thin. "In the event that Party B, Julian, commits a severe violation of ethical standards that damages the company's reputation, or engages in financial fraud, or attempts to dissipate joint assets without the consent of Party A, Elena." He stopped, looking up at me in horror. "And then?" Julian snapped. "A fine? I have plenty of money." "Then," Raymond continued, his voice trembling, "the perpetual license to the original source code and core compression algorithm granted by Party A to Ethereos shall be immediately revoked. All intellectual property rights shall belong exclusively to Party A." The room fell into a lethal silence. Julian still didn't understand. "So what? The company has hundreds of engineers now. We wrote new code. Nobody needs your old junk." I smiled. The smile of a predator when the trap snaps shut. "That's where you're wrong, Julian. You think your engineers wrote new core code? No, they built UI and add-ons on top of the kernel I wrote. That kernel is the black heart of Ethereos. Without it, data won't compress. The AI won't learn." I pulled out my phone and opened a system admin app I had secretly maintained through a backdoor long ago. The screen showed a large red button with a warning: "Revoke license and wipe kernel." My algorithm is encrypted with my private key. If I press this button, my thumb hovered over the screen, the entire Ethereum server system stops. Customers lose data, and most importantly, the company breaches its service contracts with hundreds of major partners. Julian's face drained to paper white. He stumbled back into the desk edge. Raymond dropped the paper like it was burning. He understood the legal fallout. If the system failed, Ethereus wouldn't just collapse. Julian would face criminal suits for defrauding investors while not owning the core technology. You wouldn't dare, Julian stammered, voice shaking, the arrogance gone. If the company crashes, your shares become worthless too. You lose millions. I stood and stepped closer, locking eyes with him. You think I care about money, Julian? I have intelligence. I can write a better Ethereos in 6 months. And you? What do you have? You're just a middle-aged man cheating under a shiny mask. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:15 p.m. I don't have all day to listen to excuses. Here's your choice. You have exactly 60 seconds to decide your fate. I set my phone on the desk. The countdown began. The red numbers on my phone danced without emotion. 59, 58, 57. Each second landed like a hammer on Julian's chest. The huge library suddenly felt coffin-tight. The air thickened until the only sounds were Julian's ragged breathing and Tiffany's scared sniffles. "You're cornering me," Julian hissed, sweat streaming down the collar of his expensive shirt, staining pristine white fabric. "You know I can't decide in 1 minute. This is $100 million asset." "Wrong, Julian," I said, my voice steady and terrifyingly calm. "It used to be $100 million asset. If you don't sign before the clock hits 0, it becomes a mountain of debt and a one-way ticket to prison." 45, 44. Raymond tried to salvage his last scraps of authority. "Elena, be reasonable. If you revoke the license, you lose income too. We can renegotiate ownership. 60-40? 70-30 in your favor?" I gave a small, cold laugh and pulled out another sheet. My second kill shot. Saved for this exact moment. "Negotiate? Raymond, you think this is only about IP?" I tossed the paper in front of him. "Look at this." It was a detailed statement from a Cayman Islands bank account under the name Blue Ocean Holdings. "Julian," I turned to my trembling husband, "you thought you were clever moving $5 million from the venture fund into this shell company under market development consulting fees? And guess who's listed as director of the shell company?" My gaze slid to Tiffany. She jolted, face drained. "Tiffany," I said softly, "you used your mistress's name to launder investor money. This isn't divorce or civil court anymore. This is embezzlement and federal-level securities fraud." Raymond snatched the statement. His eyes went wide. He understood the law better than anyone. If this blew up, Julian would do at least 15 years, and Raymond would lose his license for covering it up if he was connected to the shell company paperwork. 30. 29. "Julian!" Raymond whipped around, and his voice had no respect left, only panic. "Sign it. Sign right now." "What?" Julian stared at his lawyer. "Are you insane? If I sign, I lose everything." "If you don't sign, you lose your freedom," Raymond shouted, slamming the desk. "She has enough to put you in prison, and I'm not sharing a cell with you. Sign the damn paper and keep the last shred of dignity you have, or tomorrow you'll be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal as a financial criminal." Julian looked from me to Raymond to Tiffany. His cute little mistress was backing toward the door now. Her eyes no longer worshipped him. They showed disgust and fear. She realized the ship was sinking, and she wanted off. 15. 14. "Elena." Julian's voice cracked. He collapsed into the chair, clutching his head. "Why? Why are you doing this? We used to love each other. Don't you remember when we ate ramen in the garage?" I looked at the man in front of me. I felt nothing. He dared to weaponize the past after stomping on it. "I remember perfectly, Julian," I said, my voice ice. "And because I remember who you were, I have to destroy the greedy monster you became." I pushed the divorce petition and the share transfer agreement toward him. Beside it was a Mont Blanc pen. You have 10 seconds. Either you sign and walk out with your Tesla and $500,000 in cash I'm giving you. Or, I press the button, Ethereos goes down, and financial crimes enforcement knocks on your door tomorrow morning. 9, 8, 7. Julian stared at the countdown. His shaking hand grabbed the pen. He looked at me one last time, full of hatred and helplessness. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew I do what I say. 5, 4. The pen hit paper. The scratchy sound cut through the silence. Julian signed. A warped, ugly signature, nothing like the confident flourish he used to brag about. 0. The timer stopped at 0. So. I picked up the documents and checked every signature. Valid. Raymond stood there wiping sweat, exhaling like he'd just survived a near-death crash. All right, I said, taking my phone back and capping the pen. Deal complete. The system stays online. You don't go to prison, Julian. I stood, smoothed my black silk dress, and in that moment I looked more powerful than anyone in that room. Now, I pointed at the door. Get out of my house. Immediately. Julian stood, swaying like a drunk. He looked around the luxurious office one last time, his former kingdom. Now he was in exile. Tiffany. He turned to his mistress, voice weak, hunting for comfort. Let's go. But Tiffany stayed by the door, arms crossed. The baby voice sweetness from earlier was gone. Go where? She asked sharp. You only have $500,000 in a car? Are you kidding me? That's not even enough for my shopping in 1 month. What are you saying? Julian froze. I was in love with the CEO of Ethereos, Julian. Tiffany sneered. Not some unemployed middle-aged man about to go bankrupt. I think we should pause here. Bye. And she walked out, leaving Julian standing there with his mouth open. That final punch wasn't mine, but it hurt him more than anything I could have thrown. He lost everything. Family, career, money, and even the illusion of love he traded everything for. I stepped closer to Julian and whispered the last words into his ear. Happy birthday to your son, Julian. I hope this gift teaches you the lesson you forgot. Never bite the hand that fed you. I turned and walked out of the library, leaving Julian collapsed on the cold floor while his lawyer hurried to pack his things and disappear. Outside, the party still played on. The music was still soft. But when I walked out, I wasn't Julian's wife anymore. I was Elena, Ethereos' new CEO and sole owner. 14 months later. San Francisco in late fall had a chill in the air, but inside the Moscone Center ballroom, the heat was at a peak. Thousands of camera flashes fired nonstop like a storm of light. I stood on the Tech Summit Global stage, the biggest tech event on the planet. Behind me, a massive LED wall displayed Ethereos' refreshed logo and a growth chart rising like an arrow. And that's why, I said into the mic, my voice ringing with confidence, AI isn't here to replace humans. It's here to eliminate unnecessary processes. Life works the same way. Sometimes you have to remove the bugs so the whole system can run clean. The room erupted in applause. I smiled and bowed. No longer Elena, Julian's wife, or the housewife behind the scenes. This month, Forbes ran me on the cover. The Phoenix of Silicon Valley. How Elena built a billion-dollar empire from the ashes of a broken marriage. After that night, Ethereos didn't collapse. If anything, my public firing of Julian and the company restructure made investors trust transparency. The stock tripled. I used that money to buy back the Malibu estate, renovate it, and turn it into a real home for me and Noah. But the sweetest win wasn't in the stock numbers. It was the moment I walked out of the conference hall. I wore a Burberry coat and Louboutin heels, clicking a power rhythm on the sidewalk. Night wind lifted the curls I'd styled with care. Your car, Miss Elena. the valet manager said respectfully. A black Mercedes Maybach glided up. The driver's door opened. A valet stepped out, head down, hands trembling as he offered me the key. He wore a burgundy uniform that hung too loose, with a cap pulled low over half his face. But I recognized the shoes. Those handmade Italian leather shoes I'd gifted him 3 years ago. Now they were scuffed, dusty, and dulled, just like their owner. "Thank you," I said flatly, taking the key. The valet looked up. Our eyes met under the yellow streetlight. It was Julian. He looked 10 years older. The once perfect hair was messy, streaked with gray. Wrinkles were carved deep around his eyes and mouth. No expensive cologne, just exhaust fumes and the sweat of hard labor. "Elena," Julian's voice broke. He looked at me, then at the luxury car, then down at his valet uniform. Shame rose in his eyes so thick it felt touchable. "Hi, Julian." I smiled, polite, like speaking to a stranger. "This job seems to suit you. You were always good at driving for other people, weren't you?" I lost everything," Julian stammered, eyes wet. "After I left, I invested the $500,000 in crypto. I got scammed. Nobody wants to hire a former CEO with an embezzlement scandal. I applied to 50 companies, but..." He started to reach for my hand, but my bodyguard stepped between us. Julian pulled back like he'd been burned. "And Tiffany?" I asked, even though I already knew. Julian let out a bitter laugh. "Her? The second the money ran out, she disappeared with some personal trainer. But I heard she got arrested last month for being tied to another money laundering ring. You knew that would happen, didn't you?" "That's the rule, Julian." I opened the car door. Parasites always look for a new host, until the host dies, or they get destroyed. Julian watched me get into the car, eyes pleading, desperate. "Elena, please. How's Noah? Can I borrow a little money? Just for rent this month. I'm living in a horrible basement apartment." I lowered the window and looked at the man who used to be my whole world, now bending over to beg for dollars. I took a $100 bill from my wallet. "This is your tip for valet service." I pressed it into his fingers. "Use it to buy a mirror, Julian. Look into it and ask yourself how you lost a queen to chase a pawn." The window slid up, cutting off Julian's stunned face and the tear rolling down his cheek. The car pulled away, leaving city lights behind, and my faithless ex-husband standing frozen in the cold wind. In the rearview mirror, I watched him shrink into the distance until he disappeared. Then I turned to the back seat, where Noah slept peacefully in his car seat. My son will grow up without a terrible father as a bad example. I will teach him to be a good man, honest, decent, and respectful toward women. My revenge wasn't physical harm. My revenge was letting them live and forcing them to watch me succeed brilliantly without them. That's the cruelest punishment of all. This story ends with 3 costly lessons everyone should carve into their memory. Never underestimate the quiet one. Quiet, patient people aren't stupid or weak. They're observing, documenting, and preparing. When they strike, it's a finishing blow. Never sign what you haven't read. In business and marriage, laziness and complacency are the fastest road to bankruptcy. A careless signature from years ago can become your death sentence later. A woman's value doesn't depend on the man beside her. Elena proved that when she shed the terrible man holding her down, she didn't collapse. She flew higher, farther, and brighter. Women are the architects of their own lives. How do you feel about Julian's ending? Was the $100 bill and Elena's words enough to wake him up? Or was it a fitting punishment for a betrayer? If you felt satisfied seeing justice served then, like this video right now, comment Team Elena below to support strong women, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll be back tomorrow with an even more dramatic revenge story about a nightmare mother-in-law. Thanks for listening. See you next time.